Nico Iamaleava is the most loved player in the UT fan base right now. Now, obviously, this was quite the inevitability. He was a five-star quarterback and was supposed to become the best Vols quarterback since Peyton Manning all the way back in the 1990s. But how did we get here? Well, that's what I'm here for. So sit back, relax, and listen to the story of the Polynesian Pistol. Yes, I am calling him that because it's way cooler than whatever the heck 8-Ball is. So to start, we need to go back to his high school days. Nico went to high school in Downey, California, where he would make a name for himself. His accuracy, arm strength, and playmaking ability made him a 5-star. And his toughness. I remember hearing a story during those years about how Nico almost had his arm just absolutely dripping in blood, and he was projected to be out for the rest of the season, but he said to strap it up and that he was going to go back out there and play. So, because of his toughness, arm strength, accuracy, and playmaking ability, he got offers from Ole Miss, Alabama, Miami, Tennessee, and Auburn, and plenty of more schools beyond that. He ended up going with Tennessee after seeing what Josh Heupel did in year one on Old Rocky Top. He said this about Heupel's offense. "It looks really fun to play in," he continued. "I've studied what they do and feel like I'll be able to fit in really well." Once Nico got onto campus, he had to sit a year due to Joe Milton being more experienced with the offense. Yet Nico still got to play during the garbage time of blowouts against cupcake teams and showed flashes of being a great quarterback someday. Nico finally got his shot to start in the Cheez-It Bowl and faced off against Iowa. And let's just say he did not disappoint. He had 4 total touchdowns, along with 3 on the ground, and the entire Vols fan base was buzzing about how they just found the next best thing at the quarterback position. And Vols Nation was truly at an all-time peak. Everybody was united under Nico. Everybody loved that Josh Heupel was able to bring this guy in, and there was praise going around everywhere. And Vols fan base decided to blame the fact that the play calling wasn't as creative that year on the fact that Joe Milton couldn't take in the entirety of the playbook. And let's just say expectations were a little high, maybe even a little bit too high. You see, Nico got off to a really strong start at the beginning of the season. He went into week 1 playing against Chattanooga, and he threw for 315 yards and 3 touchdowns, which you're thinking, yeah, you're supposed to do that against Chattanooga. But I forgot one detail. He did all of this in the first half of the game. He was on track for 630 yards and 6 touchdowns at the pace that he was going at. Now, if he would have played the full game, would he have hit that? Probably not, due to clock management and whatnot, but it still showed that Vols fan base was right. So, after a couple of strong outings against NC State, where he had 4 total touchdowns and led Tennessee to a near 40-point blowout of NC State, people were already pegging him as the early Heisman favorite. After another cupcake game against Kent State, where he barely even had to play a quarter and a half, Nico Iamaleava went for his first big test. At the time, nobody realized how bad this team was, but he went on the road to Norman to play Oklahoma. And everybody was completely convinced that he was going to be the Heisman winner by the end of the season, him or Travis Hunter, after watching this game. Because the truth is, the stat line doesn't look as impressive. He only threw 1 touchdown. He barely threw for 200 yards. But he looked absolutely amazing in this game. And you've got to also consider the fact that we went up 25-7 or something like that to start out this football game. So obviously, Josh Heupel decided to run the ball a little bit more, be a little bit more conservative, and we were thinking, oh, he's just doing that because it's a blowout, right? Right? Well, coming off of the bye week, Josh Heupel decided to stay conservative by running the football so much that you would expect this to be a Mike Vrabel-led football team. And even though you could blame the play calling for the abysmal loss that the Vols had against Arkansas, that is definitely not the reason that they lost this football game. Because I'll tell you this, Nico Iamaleava, this was probably the worst game of Nico's entire career, up to this point at least. He threw only one touchdown, and he just looked very uncomfortable. He looked unsettled the entire night. But you were willing to give him some slack because this was his first true road test in the SEC, and it was only his 6th career start. And he almost won this game for us after throwing a dime to Dante Thornton. But then that would lead to him running out of bounds and us losing the game. Now, after hearing me talk about him just for a little bit, you're probably thinking, oh, Micah, but I can guarantee you, if you're giving him this much Heisman hype, then he was obviously going to bounce back with a 3-touchdown game next week against Florida. That you would be incorrect. He still didn't play great. Now, he played decent. He played good enough for the Vols to win this football game. He threw 1 interception and was more of a game manager in this football game. But he still showed some flash, and even though he overthrew a couple of receivers, the entire fan base was thinking once he starts hitting those receivers, this offense is going to be an absolute juggernaut. The Vols would end up beating Florida 23-17 in a game that I actually went to. Here's a picture of me and my family chilling at this game. So after this game against Florida, we saw that Alabama was coming into town, and we thought that Nico was about to have the breakout game that we had all been waiting for. Alabama's secondary had not looked good. Alabama was not looking great. I don't know how else to say it. They had just lost to Vanderbilt out of all teams. You know it's bad whenever somebody loses to Vanderbilt. So expectations were high going into this game, to say the least. And to start out in the first half, he was not that great. He didn't throw the ball that well. He threw a really bad interception, and he overthrew 5 receivers streaking down the sideline. And we know that would have changed the entire course of this game if he would have hit even just 2 or 1 of those guys. But that's here nor there, because in the second half he came alive. He hit an absolute dime to Dante Thornton, which changed the trajectory of his young career from that point on. He went on to lead a touchdown drive on that drive, and then Alabama would come back, take the lead, 17-14, and then Nico would march his team down the field. And on 3rd and 5, he throws into the end zone an absolute dime to Chris Brazzell, which would lead on to Alabama not getting it on 4th and 21. And then Tennessee would run out the clock, kick a field goal, and then pick off Jalen Milroe to win against the Tide. One of the biggest wins of Nico Iamaleava's young career. Then, after that game, he went on a nice little stretch of good games. Against Kentucky, he only had 1 touchdown and 215 yards, but if his receivers didn't drop 2 easy touchdowns that were thrown right in the breadbasket by him, he would have had 300 yards and 3 touchdowns and would have had potentially his magnum opus against Kentucky. But that's here nor there. He went on to go play against Mississippi State, and he started out really strong in this game. He threw 2 deep touchdowns, but he got hurt about midway through this game, which led to Gaston Moore going in. Shout out to Gas Pipe. And there was some serious concern that he wasn't going to play against the Georgia Bulldogs. But after that, it ended up being that Nico could play against Georgia, which, as we look back, didn't make that big of a difference. The defense had one of the worst nights of its season, and Nico did everything that he could to try and find an open receiver or do anything with his legs, but it just wasn't going to cut it, and Georgia won this game 31-17. which would eliminate Tennessee from the playoff. Oh, wait, I forgot to mention, this was the first year that the 12-team playoff was introduced into college football, so the Vols still had a chance to get into this playoff. After this week, they ended up being the first one out, so they had to have some things bounce their way to make sure that they could win and get into the playoff. And then after the week against UTEP, obviously, cupcake game, even though it started out a little slow, 0-0, the team still found a way to win this game. It would mean Ole Miss went on to lose to Florida, which would lead to Tennessee having a playoff spot wide open right there for them. And also Colorado lost this week. I'm not too sure how much that would have affected our playoff spot, but it could have been very helpful later on down the line. But anyway, so after that week, vibes were good in Tennessee. Everybody was expecting us to go into Vandy, to easily beat them, and then we would be in the college football playoff. After a minor scare through the first quarter against Vanderbilt, the Tennessee Vols ended up making it into the playoffs, winning this game 36-23, which was the best game of Nico Iamaleava's young career. And he had thrown for 3 touchdowns, only 1 interception on a deep ball, and was throwing absolute dimes left and right, and flashed some of that chemistry that he had made with Mike Matthews. Now, obviously, that name is a little weird right now, whenever I'm recording this, because we don't know if Mike Matthews is going to leave or stay at UT. I will put an edit in here if he ends up staying or going, just so y'all know. But anyway, he has an absolute great game, and that led to Tennessee being in the college football playoff. Now, leading into this game against Ohio State, people were expecting Old Rocky Top to be a serious sleeper in the college football playoff. They thought that Ohio State was coming off of a weird week against Michigan, which made people think that they were a lot worse than they actually were. And people genuinely believed that this team had the stuff and potentially believed that they could go all the way, especially if Nico broke out. Well, Nico broke out, but the rest of the team sure crumbled in the big moment. Yeah, the Vols got smacked in this game 42-17, but Nico played pretty decent. He was the only reason that this team was in this football game, and overall it was a underwhelming but promising end to the season of the young career of Nico Iamaleava. Which now leads us to today, where Nico has the highest expectations that a Vols quarterback has had, well, since Hendon Hooker's last year on Old Rocky Top, I guess. But he has some high expectations to fill. People are expecting him to have a big breakout year and immediately go on to the NFL. The fan base is behind him, and at this point, there's no excuse for him to be a great quarterback. But let me know your thoughts down below. I love y'all, and go Big Orange.